Hello. It's working. How is everybody? Okay? Good. Can you guys hear me okay in the breezeway? You can. Good. I'm seeing thumbs up in the back, which is good. What a thrill to see so many people. It's such a gift. It's so nice to see so many folks here. Thank you for choosing to be here right now. Yeah. A thing to applaud. We're so lucky to have Jericho Brown here in Tucson, and we'll get to him in a moment, and I'll read an introduction for him shortly, but there's a few housekeeping things I just wanted to say very quickly. I am modeling very bad mask etiquette right now at the microphone, and I want to do that so you can hear me, but we're asking all of you to wear your masks incredibly well while you're in the audience, so thank you for wearing masks and keeping them above your nose and around your mouth. And we're doing that for a few reasons. We want to keep everybody safe, but we also want to make sure we can keep bringing poets back. And so this is often one of the things people ask about when they come to visit is, will people be masked? And so we really appreciate everybody willing to do that. And we're grateful for it. Thanks for doing it. If you don't have a mask and you might need one, there's a table over there that has some extras, and we're grateful for you for doing that. So thank you. None of these readings happen without a team, and that team is the Poetry Center staff. And so I just want to take a moment to applaud them and especially point out a few that are here that are working. So this is my colleague, Paula Valenzuela. She's over here. She's been here for 3 months. It's amazing. It's just like she's been here forever, and we're so lucky that she's here. Then my colleague, Sarah Jimsky's over here, helping make sure that those people on the live stream are able to watch at the live stream. So if you have not been in the Poetry Center for readings earlier this fall, you might know that we did a bunch of work upgrading the space during the pandemic. And so there are new assistive listening devices. There's a loop system that's inside this carpeted space. There's an app system that you can plug into your phone and get a direct feed from the soundboard. And there's a live streaming option. So folks are hopefully watching us from far away. I'll wave to them. Thank you for tuning in wherever you are and joining us this evening. There are books for sale, and Jericho will sign books after the reading. So those are for sale over here, and Alexia is selling those. There's copies of the Tradition and the New Testament. So the most recent and the adjacent book to that are for sale over here, and you can buy those, and we hope that you will. And you should buy two, because you have two hands, so you need two. I will also say this is our last reading of the fall semester, and so you'll soon, if you're on the Poetry Center's mailing list, which you all should be because you love this place, you'll be getting in the mail our spring calendar, and I will just tease you about a couple of things that are coming up. If you happen not to be on that mailing list and you're feeling left out right now, also on that black table there are some sign-up slips where you can get on that mailing list, and we'll send you our calendar in the mail. It's very attractive. It fits wonderfully on your fridge. Our first reading in the spring will be on January 6th, so pretty early in the new year, and that's with the poet Forrest Gander, who'll be coming back to Tucson. On February 17th, we'll have the poets Jay Hopler and Kimberly Johnson together. And then on March 17th, we'll have the poets Marwa Halal and Marcelo Hernandez Castillo in our annual Morgan Lucas Schultz reading. So those are some things to look forward to, and we're really excited about those events this spring. And if you can remember those, get those on your calendars now. We are also excited that we will do a Q&A after this reading. Jericho says, I love questions. So as you're listening, think of questions. And Paula will come around, when we get to that part of the night, you can raise your hand. Paula will come to you with a microphone because our space is so big and stretched out, so we can hear you. She'll pass you the microphone, and just be patient with her because it's an athletic process to move around. And we'd be excited to do questions and answers, and really excited for that part of this.
What's the app?
What's the app? And I'm so sorry. Nate, do you know the name of the app? No, and I'm so sorry. It's Listen Everywhere, I believe it's called. Listen Everywhere is the app. Okay. Yep, Sarah says yes. Listen Everywhere. So if you download the app, the soundboard should talk directly to a smartphone, which should start directly to an assistive device. Listen Everywhere is the app. Thank you, and I'm sorry to not have that at the tip of my tongue. I should have said this at the beginning. My name's Tyler. I work here as the director at the Poetry Center, and it's nice to have a crowd. Normally these introductions are done by my colleague Deanna Delgado, who couldn't be here tonight, and so she sends her best regards to everybody and is hopefully tuning in to watch from home, where she needs to be right now. And I want to introduce our poet and then get out of the way so that we can be here what we're really here for, which is to hear Jericho read. And it's a thrill to have him back in Tucson after visiting before, and for the first time, I think, here at the Poetry Center, which is a real gift for us. And thank you for making him welcome and for bringing such a crowd out to come hear his work and listen to his words. It's a gift and a thrill, and maybe even a little bit of a balm, given the news cycle that we have had the last few days. This is indeed December 2nd. We are still in the middle of a pandemic that seems to continue and continue, in a country that seems to lead and lag in alternating turns. Breathing, which we all need to do to stay alive and communicate with each other, to say our poems out loud, also now is this way that we can hurt each other. And so rereading Brown's most recent collection, The Tradition, this week, it has been impossible not to feel the deep resonances of personal and collective illnesses and wellnesses, what it means to be both sick and rich with history. Like no other poet I know, Brown's poems remind us that the body is equally capable of being the perfect vessel for what it holds. We might remember Whitman's words that we contain multitudes, however wildly we contain those. I think, in a way, this is one tradition that is most wonderful, that this most wonderful book is about. The bright and the dark that we are equally capable of. Another tradition are the lineages that make us, our people, both given and chosen, whether that's a grandmother's sassy love or a friendship that affirms and deepens our experiences. But perhaps the most profound is the lyric tradition that this book reinvigorates. The insistence in each poem that language, carefully made, imaginatively used, that language ultimately becomes our lives. Across all his poems, in this book, which was a finalist for the National Book Award and which won the 2020 Pulitzer Prize, no small thing, an intermediate applause, or in either of the earlier books, the New Testament or the book Please, his poems are deeply interested in what it might mean to be legible to ourselves, to those that we love, or to the social and cultural forces that define our moment and all that has come before it and the promise of what might come after. Ultimately, for me, in rereading Jericho's poems and thinking about them, they read like a kind of lyrical bioluminescence spreading out against the chop of the open waters of our days. Imagine for a second that you and the person that you are sitting next to are fishing here now in these murky waters. What you might catch is some light among the darkness. And here's to that hope that there's among us, that some of us tonight might catch a little bit of light. And I hope that that might happen. Jericho makes his home in Atlanta, where he is the Charles Howard Candler Professor of English and Creative Writing at Emory University. And he also directs the creative writing program there. It is truly a thrill to have him here in Tucson. Please help me welcome Jericho Brown.
Yeah, lots of water. Big thank you to Tyler for that introduction. He said such nice things about me. I like it when people say nice things about me. And Tyler, actually, I know him to be, there are many people on this planet who are known to be the people who make life a little bit easier and more smooth going for writers. And Tyler is one of those people. And so I'm so grateful to have him on the planet Earth. Big thank you to Deanna for all of the organization around this, for Paula for being such a fabulous hostess to me this entire time I've been here, and to the entire center staff. They're some very kind people, and I appreciate that. And I love, this is my second time coming in here I really just want to stay in the apartment all the time and be so close to so many books that I love. Just being in proximity to the books makes me feel smart. I'm gonna read you some poems. I'll read straight through. In some cases, I will give some context for some poems. Is it okay? Can I read you some poems? Before I read, I should say this. I visited Claire's honors class today, and I had a meeting. I wasn't aware that this was going to happen, but they sort of cut the class short so that I could go to another appointment or event. And I didn't know that was going to happen. I thought it was just that I would sort of get on my phone and leave out. And so I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut the class short at all. I hope that some of those students are here. Are any of those students here? I hope that some of those students are here such that if they did have questions that they didn't get to ask, they can ask them tonight, if not during the Q&A, then at the signing table or even after that. Thank you all so much for coming this way and for being together. I do hope that we value more than ever the opportunity to be together in this way. Where I'm from, we always, no matter what we were beginning, we always begin with prayer. So, prayer of the backhanded, not the palm, not the pear tree switch, not the broomstick, nor the closest extension cord, not his braided belt, but God, bless the back of my daddy's hand, which, holding nothing tightly against me and not wrapped in leather, eliminated the air between itself and my cheek. Make full this dimpled cheek, unworthy of its unfisted print, and forgive my forgetting the love of a hand hungry for reflex, a hand that took no thought of its target, like hail from a blind sky, involuntary, fast, but brutal in its bruising. Father, I bear the bridge of what might have been a broken nose. I lift to you what was a busted lip. Bless the boy who believes his best beatings lack intention, the mark of the beast. Bring back to life the son who glories in the sin of immediacy, calling it love. God, save the man whose arm, like an angel's invisible wing, may fly backward in fury, whether or not his son stands near. Help me hold in place my blazing jaw as I think to say, excuse me. Oh, it's a clapping audience. That's nice. Thank you. Labor. I spent what light Saturday sent sweating and learned to cuss cutting grass for women kind enough to say they couldn't tell the damned difference between their mowed lawns and their vacuumed carpets just before handing over a $5 bill rolled tighter than a joint and asking me in to change a few light bulbs. I called those women old because they wouldn't move out of a chair without my help or walk without a hand at the base of their backs. I called them old, and they must have been. They're all dead now, dead and in the earth I once tended. The loneliest people have the earth to love, and not one friend their own age. Only mothers to baby them, and big sisters to boss them around. Women you want to please and pray for the chance to say please to. I don't do that kind of work anymore. My job is to look at the childhood I hated and say, I once had something to do with my hands. This next poem is titled after a phrase that I've only heard used in Louisiana or by people from Louisiana. If you do not know the phrase, don't worry, it will be made clear to you as I read the poem. 4 in the morning. My mother grew morning glories that spilled onto the walkway toward her porch because she was a woman with land who showed as much by giving it color. She told me I could have whatever I worked for. That means she was an American. But she'd say it was because she believed in God. I am ashamed of America and confounded by God. I thank God for my citizenship in spite of the timer set on my life to write these words. I love my mother. I love Black women who plant flowers as sheepish as their sons. By the time the blooms unfurl themselves for a few hours of light, the women who tend them are already at work. Blue, I'll never know who started the lie that we are lazy, but I'd love to wake that bastard up at 4 in the morning, toss him in a truck, and drive him under God past every bus stop in America to see all those Black folk waiting to go work for whatever they want. A house, a boy to keep the lawn cut, some color in the yard. My God, we leave things green. Thank you. I'm often asked what my process is and how I go about making poems, and the answer to that question is much too long and often boring. But I will say about this next poem that it is completely built out of phrases that I heard as a kid growing up in the neighborhood where I grew up, in the church where I grew up, in the school where I grew up. And so you should know that no line in this poem is an original Jericho Brown line. Autobiography. Keep the line steady. Keep your back straight. Keep coming back for more. Keep fucking with me, Cletus. Keep putting your hands on me like that, and you'll always have a place to lay your head. Keep my waistline down. Keep your figure up. Keep your man happy. Keep a woman crazy. Keep your daddy off your mama, or next time I'm calling the police. Keep these nappy-headed children off my green grass. Keep talking smart if you want to. Keep looking at my man and I'll cut you a new eyelid. Keep looking me in my face when you tell your next lie. Keep on walking, I ain't talking to you anymore. Keep holding that last note. Keep singing while I get the splinter out. Keep singing for Jesus, baby, and everything will be all right. Keep me in your prayers. Keep us in your thoughts. Keep your eyes on the Black one. He ain't got no sense. Keep your money in your pocket, Nelson. These hoes giving it away. Keep this one occupied. I'll get his wallet. Keep on living, honey, and you'll get old too. This next poem has a little bit of the Odyssey in it, and I should say I feel reading it now that it owes a debt to a poem I love, long series of sonnets I love by Gwendolyn Brooks called Gay Chaps at the Bar. Hero. She never knew one of us from another, so my brothers and I grew up fighting over our mother's mind. Like sun-colored suitors in a Greek myth, we were willing to do evil. We kept chocolate around our mouths. The last of her mother's lot, she cried at funerals, cried when she whipped me. She whipped me daily. I am most interested in people who declare gratitude for their childhood beatings. None of them took what my mother gave, waking us for school with sharp slaps to our bare thighs. That side of the family is darker. I should be grateful, so I will be. No one on earth knows how many abortions happened before a woman risked her freedom by giving that risk a name, by taking it to breast. I don't know why I am alive now, that I still cannot impress the woman who whipped me into being. I turned my mother into a grandmother. She thanks me by kissing my sons. Gratitude is black. Black as a hero returning from war to a country that banked on his death. Thank God, it can't get much darker than that. As a human being, there is the happiness you have and the happiness you deserve. They sit apart from each other, the way you and your mother sat on opposite ends of the sofa after an ambulance came to take your father away. Some good doctor will stitch him up, and soon an aunt will arrive to drive your mother to the hospital, where she will settle next to him forever, as promised. She holds the arm of her seat as if she could fall, as if it is the only sturdy thing. And it is, since you've done what you always wanted. You fought your father and won, marred him. He'll have a scar he can see, all because of you. And your mother, the only woman you ever cried for, must tend to it as a bride tends to her vows, forsaking all others, no matter how sore the injury. No matter how sore the injury has left you, you sit understanding yourself as a human being, finally free now that nobody's got to love you. There are a few people standing, and I don't know if it might be that they just want to stand, but maybe someone can raise their hand if there's a seat or two next to them. Maybe they would like that, I'm not sure. This next poem, again, has a title. The title is a word with which you may not be familiar. I should mention, I grew up in Louisiana. I grew up in Shreveport, Louisiana. I moved there and I lived in New Orleans, Louisiana for almost 10 years. I left there and I lived in Houston, Texas, where I got my PhD. And then I got my first full-time job as a professor at a college in San Diego, California, which is where I found out that I have an accent. I also learned that there were several words and phrases that were particular to the South and particular to Louisiana, and I didn't understand that I would miss them as much as I missed them until I would say them and people would look at me as if I were speaking another language. The title of this next poem is Nim. Nim means that person and everyone you associate with that person, and you hear it all the time in the South. To put it in context for you, if you went to high school with somebody, you hadn't seen them in a long time, but when you knew them before, you knew them and you knew their family. When you see them again, you might say to them, "Hey, how you doing? How is your mama?" Nim. Nim. They said to say goodnight and not goodbye. Unplugged the TV when it rained. They hid money in mattresses, so to sleep on decisions. Some of their children were not their children. Some of their parents had no birth dates. They could sweat a cold out of you. They'd wake without an alarm telling them to. Even the short ones reached certain shelves. Even the skinny cooked animals too quick to catch. And I don't care how ugly one of them arrived. That one got married to somebody fine. They fed families with change and wiped their kitchens clean. Then another century came. People like me forgot their names. You may want to know for this next poem that Janis Joplin recorded the Gershwin Standard Summertime with Big Brother and the Holding Company for their 1968 chart-topping album, Cheap Thrills. She died of a heroin overdose in 1970. She was 27 years old. Track 5, Summertime, as performed by Janis Joplin. God's got his eye on me, but I ain't a sparrow. I'm more like a lawnmower. No, a chainsaw. Anything that might mangle each manicured lawn in Port Arthur, a place I wouldn't return to if the mayor offered me every ounce of oil my daddy cans at the refinery. My voice, ain't sweet. Nothing nice about it. It won't fly, even with Jesus watching. I don't believe in Jesus. The Baxter boys climbed a tree just to throw persimmons at me. The good and perfect gifts from above hit like lightning, leave bruises. So I lied. I believe, but I don't think God likes me. The girls in the locker room slapped dirty pads across my face. They called me bitch, but I never bit back. I ain't a dog. Chainsaw, I say. My voice hacks at you. I bet I tear my throat. I try so hard to sound jagged. I get high and say one thing so many times, like Willie Baker, who worked across the street. I saw some kids whip him with a belt while he repeated, please. School out, summertime, and the living lashed. Mama said I should be thankful that the town's worse to coloreds than they are to me, that I'd grow out of my acne. God must love Willie Baker, all that leather, and still a please that sounds like music. See, I wouldn't know a sparrow from a mockingbird. The band plays, I just belt out, please. This tune ain't half the blues. I should be thankful. I get high and moan like a lawnmower so nobody notices. I'm such an ugly girl. I'm such an ugly girl. I try to sing like a man boys call boy. I turn my face to God. I pray. I wish I could pour oil on everything green in Port Arthur. I wrote the next poem after finding out about and being confounded by the very long list of people who have supposedly committed suicide while in police custody. That list includes people like Jesus Huerta in North Carolina, who, after having been patted down while handcuffed on the walk from the police cruiser to the building where he was to be booked, supposedly somehow managed to shoot himself in the back corner of his head. Victor White III in Louisiana, where I'm from, who, after having been patted down while handcuffed, sitting in the back seat of a police cruiser, somehow supposedly managed to shoot himself in his upper back. Sandra Bland in Texas, who, after a day of fighting for her life, hung herself with a trash bag in a cell where there's video footage of her. There's technical difficulty. The feed somehow goes out. And according to the coroner, that video footage, we see Sandra Bland in the cell and then suddenly we don't. That video footage must go out at just the moment that Sandra Bland hung herself with a trash bag. Bullet points. I will not shoot myself in the head, and I will not shoot myself in the back, and I will not hang myself with a trash bag. And if I do, I promise you, I will not do it in a police car while handcuffed, or in the jail cell of a town I only know the name of, because I have to drive through it to get home. Yes, I may be at risk, but I promise you, I trust the maggots who live beneath the floorboards of my house to do what they must to any carcass, more than I trust an officer of the law of the land to shut my eyes like a man of God might, or to cover me with a sheet so clean my mother could have used it to tuck me in. When I kill me, I will do it the same way most Americans do. I promise you, cigarette smoke. or a piece of meat on which I choke, or so broke I freeze in one of these winters we keep calling worst. I promise if you hear of me dead anywhere near a cop, then that cop killed me. He took me from us and left my body, which is, no matter what we've been taught, greater than the settlement a city can pay a mother to stop crying, and more beautiful than the new bullet fished from the folds of my brain. I'm reading a great deal, I see, of poems that seem to come out of my childhood. When I was a kid, I was such a nerd. And I know it's not good to walk around saying that you had it worse than anybody else. I mean, no one can really say, oh, my situation is worse than everybody else's situation, but mine really was. And I can tell you why. You know, many of you, I'm not the only nerd in this room. Some of us grew up video game nerds, but the wonderful thing about being a video game nerd is that you have other people to play video games with. You know, some of us grew up being comic book nerds, but you know, if you're a comic book nerd, you have a place to go. I grew up and I was a riddle nerd. I loved a riddle. Can you imagine 7-year-old me knocking on your knee, asking you a series of questions and expecting you to give me the answer? So I was in a really bad position. And when I became a poet, it became very important to me. I wanted to sort of honor that past, that child, that little Jericho Brown. And I wanted to write a poem that was also a riddle, but I kept failing. And the reason I kept failing is because when you write a riddle, you already know where you're going. You're creating questions in order to back into an answer that you already know. When you write a poem, though, you're writing to not know. You're writing to discover or to find out. So this next poem that I read you is indeed a riddle, but I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to the riddle. You know, maybe y'all can send me an email letting me know what you think it is. Riddle. We do not recognize the body of Emmett Till. We do not know the boy's name, nor the sound of his mother wailing. We have never heard a mother wailing. We do not know the history of this nation in ourselves. We do not know the history of ourselves on this planet because we do not have to know what we believe we own. We believe we own your bodies, but have no use for your tears. We destroy the body that refuses use. We use maps we did not draw. We see a sea, so cross it. We see a moon, so land there. We love land so long as we can take it. Shh, we can't take that sound. What is a mother wailing? We do not recognize music until we can sell it. We sell what cannot be bought. We buy silence. Let us help you. How much does it cost to hold your breath underwater? Wait. What are we? What on earth are we? What? This next poem, thank you, makes use of the myth of Ganymede. Poets can't get enough of Greek myth. And if you do not know that particular Greek myth, I think it'll become clear to you as I read the poem. Ganymede. A man trades his son for horses. That's the version I prefer. I like the safety of it. No one at fault, everyone rewarded. God gets the boy. The boy becomes immortal. His father rides until grief sounds as good as the gallop of an animal born to carry those who patrol our inherited kingdom. When we look at myth this way, nobody bothers saying rape. I mean, don't you want God to want you? Don't you dream of someone with wings taking you up? And when the master comes for our children, he smells like the men who own stables in heaven, that far terrain between promise and apology. No one has to convince us. The people of my country believe we can't be hurt. if we can be bought. Say thank you. Say I'm sorry. I don't know whose side you're on, but I am here for the people who work in grocery stores that glow in the morning and close down for deep cleaning at night, right up the street and in cities I mispronounce, in towns too tiny for my big black car to quit, and in every wide corner of Kansas where going to school means at least one field trip to a slaughterhouse. I want so little. Another leather-bound book, a gimlet with a lavender gin, bread so good when I taste it, I can tell you how it's made. I'd like us to rethink what it is to be a nation. I'm in a mood about America today. I have PTSD about the Lord. God, save the people who work in grocery stores. They know a bit of glamour is a lot of glamour. They know how much it costs for the eldest of us to eat. Save my loves and not my sentences. Before I see them, I draw a mole near my left dimple, add flair to the smile they can't see behind my mask. I grin or lie, or maybe I wear the mouth of a beast. I eat wild animals while some of us grow up knowing what gnocchi is. The people who work at the grocery don't care. They say, thank you. They say, sorry, we don't sell motor oil anymore, with a grief so thick you could touch it. Go on, touch it. It is early. It is late. They have washed their hands. They have washed their hands for you, and they take the bus home. I'm reading to you retrospectively, which is to say I'm reading a bit from my first book, Please, from my second book, The New Testament. My mother's still angry with me about that title. And from my most recent book, The Tradition. One of the features of The Tradition is a form I invented called the duplex. The duplex is at once a hustle, a sonnet, and a blues poem. And I'll read an example of that for you, and hopefully you'll hear those elements come through. Duplex. I begin with love, hoping to end there. I don't want to leave a messy corpse. I don't want to leave a messy corpse full of medicines that turn in the sun. Some of my medicines turn in the sun. Some of us don't need hell to be good. Those who need most need hell to be good. What are the symptoms of your sickness? Here is one symptom of my sickness. Men who love me are men who miss me. Men who leave me are men who miss me in the dream where I am an island. In the dream where I am an island, I grow green with hope. I'd like to end there. And I'd like to finish with some love poems. Can I read you some love poems? You know you have to ask for consent. This next poem is about cuddling. I love poetry more than anything, except one thing, and that's cuddling. Stand. Peace on this planet, or guns glowing hot. We lay there together as if we were getting something done. It felt like planting a garden or planning a meal for a people who still need feeding. All that touching or barely touching, not saying much, not adding anything. The cushion of it, the skin and occasional sigh, all seemed like work worth mastering. I'm sure somebody died while we made love. Somebody killed somebody black. I thought then of holding you as a political act. I may as well have held myself. We didn't stand for one thought, didn't do a damn thing. And though you left me, I'm glad we didn't. And I'll finish with the last poem in the book, which is also the last duplex in the book. I mentioned to you earlier that the duplex is at once a hustle, a sonnet, and a blues poem. This particular duplex adds a layer of form in that it is also a cento. As you know, a cento takes all of its lines from other poems, usually by other poets. This particular cento is different as it is completely made up of lines from all the other duplexes in the book. Because I'm a geek. I wanted to tell you that because I think I read a duplex earlier, so you will hear that line coming back, and I didn't want y'all to think I had run out of ideas or something. I did that on purpose. You know, it's actually funny, and I feel comfortable saying this at a place like the Poetry Center. There's always these, and it's all in fun, I'm sure, because there are all these, funny, among my writer friends, there's always these funny fights that we'll have just about what is the superior genre, which is always so hilarious, right? Particularly when you know that can't no fiction writer read you the last page of their book, baby. Duplex, cento. My last love drove a burgundy car, color of a rash, a symptom of sickness. We were the symptoms, the road, our sickness. None of our fights ended where they began. None of the beaten end where they begin. Any man in love can cause a messy corpse. But I didn't want to leave a messy corpse obliterated in some lilied field. Stench obliterating lilies of the field. The murderer, young and unreasonable. He was so young, so unreasonable, steadfast and awful, tall as my father. Steadfast and awful, my tall father was my first love. He drove a burgundy car. Thank you so much. I'm not sure how much time we have, but I would love to take questions. If anyone has any questions, y'all don't have to feel at all forced to ask any. And I imagine a microphone can come to you unless you know you can be very loud, behind your mask. I think it's so lovely that y'all even have masks on if you're sitting outside. I think that's so nice and giving. Something about that feels so giving. But yes, poetry readings are very difficult for me. I'm always so nervous, but I like answering questions because then I find out what I think. Somebody asks me something and I'm like, oh, I don't know. So now I got to figure it out real quick. So if anybody does have any questions, I'd appreciate it. I'll answer them for you. You can ask me anything you want about my poems or about poetry in general, or how long it took me to get my hair like this. Anything? Are there any questions? Yes.
When did you write your first poem? How old were you?
Oh, it was on the refrigerator. My mom put it on the refrigerator, and I imagine I was 5. I might have been 6, but I think I was 5 because it was before Miss Johnson. Miss Johnson was my first grade teacher. So, yeah, I've been writing for a long time. Getting better, too. I'm way better than that poem now. I do not remember it. And if I did, I probably wouldn't share it. But I don't remember it. So I'm not holding back. Anybody else? Yes.
Who are the poets you fell in love with when you were going to college?
Oh, in college? Well, I should say, in college I found Lucille Clifton. I didn't have Lucille Clifton before. I found Amiri Baraka. I didn't have Amiri Baraka before. I had Gwendolyn Brooks, but I met Gwendolyn Brooks while I was in college, which is a whole nother very beautiful and important story to my life. I think being introduced to her personally and speaking with her, I had dinner with her one night and I sat next to her and I'll never forget this. She turned to me and she said, so what is your conception of the line? And I was 19 years old. and I had no conception of the line. But after that conversation, I went and got me one. So those are some of those writers. Anybody else? I thought, yes.
Well, I know this is a terrible question to ask, but I'm going to do it anyway. Since you are head of creative writing and you are an incredible poet.
Thank you.
So how do you teach poetry?
I think it's a matter of teaching strategy. Reading, you fall in love with feeling, you fall in love with sound, but you also fall in love with content. We're often attracted in terms of content and theme to what we already want to know more about when we read. So if you like cats, you might want to read a book of poetry about cats. And what I teach is actually that the cats are not that important, because I know that there can be really good poems about cats and really not so hot poems about cats. And so part of what I teach is I teach people who want to be poets how to read poetry such that they are stealing strategies, maybe stealing it in the best word, but such that they are influenced by strategies used by other poets to make poems happen. And those strategies happen outside of theme or content or subject. A strategy, for instance, might be opening a poem with the word you, such that the reader suddenly feels that they are being spoken to, right? Or a strategy might be making a very concrete list in a poem and then ending in an abstraction. So I teach writers to see those kinds of things happen. And I say, that's why you're turned on. It's not because it's about cats. There were some poems toward the back. Yeah, right here.
Hello, thank you so much. I just wanted to ask about the duplex.
Yeah.
Was that an invented form of your own, or was that something you came upon? And I just wanted you to talk a little bit more about that form.
Yes, it's an invented form of my own. And I wanted to make a form that was ultimately a form that was how I feel, like how I feel in the world. I think I mentioned in the class today, sometimes I feel like a little bit of a mutt, and I get called to the mat about identity. People want me to let them know what I am, and they want to be able to identify me as only that thing. I don't feel that I'm 37% Black and 12% queer and 6% Southern. I feel like I'm 100% my mother's son. I'm 100% everything, my sister's brother. I'm 100% everything that I am. And I wanted to make a poem that somehow married several things and put them together. The question, sort of the pervading question for me at the time was, how do I make a poem that is definitely a puzzle, that when poets or any reader of puzzles reads it, they say, oh, this is a puzzle, and also make a poem that is a sonnet? How do I get those things to live? The other thing about the duplex that I didn't mention is that every line in the duplex is 9 to 11 syllables long. Why did I do that? I wanted to marry East and West. I wanted that 9 to 11 syllables will almost always approximate iambic pentameter, but it also reaches toward the East, where many of the poetic forms are in syllabic rather than meter. So that's how I came to it.
How'd you name it?
I decided that the poem, because the poem, you sort of have to see it, so maybe you'll buy a book. Anyway, I decided that the poem, because as I look at it, it's a poem of couplets, but every second line gets repeated. So there's a way that the house of the duplex is always sharing a wall. And I thought, particularly when I wrote the poem, it seemed to me a metaphor. The word duplex seemed to me kind of a metaphor for how I kept hearing that we were suddenly, I don't know why it was so sudden to so many people, but that we were suddenly in this divided country. And I kept thinking, oh, what is it like? I'm from a state, by the way, where the architecture includes very many duplexes. And I was interested in this idea of living in a house or living in a space that is exactly like the space next door to you, and how much you share with your neighbors, how much you know about your neighbors, and how much you never know, and how much you don't want to know, or how much you don't have to know. And so while it's a poem I wanted the couplets in a way to stand on their own, and I also wanted them to be connected. And the word duplex, because of what a duplex is, seemed to encapsulate that for me in the moment. There's somebody way back there.
Thank you. I'm way back here.
Hi.
I'm a writer and musician, not a poet, but I wanted to say that I've been to many, many readings at the Poetry Center. This is the only one that I cried at.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Wow. That feels great. Thank you. There's one over here.
Good evening. I also want to thank Tyler and everyone for making this possible. The spoken word being here in person really means a lot. So thanks so much. I have a question inspired by Kevin Young's anthology, African American Poetry, 250 Years of Struggle and Song. I was just wondering, I read, of course, your poems that are anthologized there, but I was just interested in maybe hearing you reflect on the relationship between song and poetry for yourself. It did come up a few times tonight, but just if you had other thoughts about song and your poetry.
Yeah, I think it's very useful if you're any kind of an artist, and if you're a writer in particular, for you to have a metaphor for your work. And that metaphor, most often I tell my students, it's a good idea if that metaphor comes from your other thing, right? You know, my students, they love to tell me all they want to do is write poetry. All they want to do is read literature. And I'm like, okay, but what else do you really want to do? And then I find out, that my students, I have a student who knows how to build an elevator and loves doing it. Do you know what I mean? I have students who, I am the person in this space who knows the most about Diana Ross and the Supremes. Do you know what I mean? I have students who are, I have one student, for instance, who went to the Olympics. He's a swimmer. And so when he thinks about his work, he can think in terms of rhythm and laps and breath. Do you understand what I mean? And for me, music always became the model for me to be able to get my work done. So I wouldn't be able to explain it, but except that when I'm working on a poem, when I'm revising a poem, for instance, I might get to a certain point and I say, there's not enough bass here. Or I'll say to myself, I should have some strings. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if I could ever say what I mean by that, but I know that my relationship to music is what helps me revise that moment in the poem. Anybody else? No? There's one up here.
Let's see how I can get to there.
It's a lavender shirt right here. A lovely lavender shirt. Is this anybody's first poetry reading? No? Oh, all right. I love that. I like to pop a cherry. All right. That's beautiful. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hi. Thank you, first of all.
Thank you.
And my question is, would you mind sharing a few of your favorite albums, speaking of music, either of all time or from this year?
Yeah, I can. Sometimes albums are a little difficult for me because I like a lot of music in retrospect. And so I don't always remember the name of the album because I wasn't there when it came out. I'm pretty sure, for instance, that I love Fulfilling This First Finale by Stevie Wonder. But then sometimes I think I get it mixed up with because I'm not so great at titles ultimately. But Stevie Wonder's great. And I love maybe every Stevie Wonder album. There's not a Stevie Wonder album that I have complaints about, for instance. Similarly, I feel that way about Donny Hathaway's work. More contemporarily, as it relates to R&B in particular, I really like Brandy's Never Say Never, and I like Full Moon. What else do I love? I don't know. Those are some albums just to start us off, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you, but the microphone's almost there. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you.
Is that Cynthia?
It is.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi. How are you? Baby, that lady can write. You hear me? She is not playing. Keep her away from the typewriter, honey. I'm sorry. Hi, Cynthia. Hi.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Really. I almost forgot the question. So I wanted to ask you a question about process, but kind of narrow so that you don't have to, talk all night. But your performance of the poem is so musical, to follow up on what some people have said, so distinctive. What does your ear do when you are writing the poem? And how oral does the poem become as you're finishing it?
Yeah. The poem's oral from the beginning to the end. I mean, from the beginning to the time I send a poem out or turn in the manuscript. Even if it's at the level of the line, I find myself chanting the line to myself, thinking, if I chant it enough, maybe I'll get a second line. I would say that one of the things that I noticed about many of the poets that I loved, and then this was confirmed for me in an essay by Richard Hugo called Writing Off the Subject, that no sound gets left alone. So it wasn't, in a way, this came natural to me because of what I was reading. Then I noticed myself doing it and I became more purposeful about it. If I make a sound, I only allow for so many syllables to pass before I make that sound again. And I think that happens also on the level of image, right? Like if I show a certain kind of a shape, I want to repeat that kind of a shape within a certain number of lines. So I think a lot of what happens in terms of music for me has to do with the fact of the repetition of sound, not just at the end of the line where rhyme often is, but throughout the lines and throughout the poem. And I think it creates a certain kind of unity of sound where even if you don't know what the poem is about necessarily, you do feel a sense of oneness of sound having read the poem. I'll also say about performance, and I think about sound, like everybody here, I feel really largely influenced by Shakespeare and the plays. We have no choice, right? If you have any kind of an education, the plays very quickly get stuffed down your throat. And I was always excited. I think maybe I took them a little too seriously. I wanted to know what was going on and I didn't understand a word of them. So when I would go to class and I would hear the teacher talk about those plays, I was really listening. And I think since that time, I've always been interested in poems that interact with a reader as if they are speaking to the reader. And I think that has something to do with how the sounds come across as well, because there's a way that I want the poems to be lifted. And, I was just talking to a friend on the phone about this, about Lowell. There's a way that the poems are lifted in language, but also a way that he's very clearly speaking to. Dickinson is this way too, speaking to someone. So I think that has something to do with it as well. Thank you. Anybody else? There's one up here.
Let me just say, I'm a retired teacher of logic and expository composition, and I can tell that you are a great teacher.
Oh, thank you.
And I have really appreciated the specificity with which you've been able to answer these questions about how you go about actually approaching your work. So my question would be, how or when did you know that you not only liked writing poetry and you wanted to write poetry, but that you actually were a person who could be brave enough to claim a career as a poet?
It's a great question. I think I was working toward that bravery my entire life until I had a first book. And it's hard to speak about because, in particular, if you want to be any kind of artist, you're dealing with a situation where when people ask you, I don't know why people think it's okay to ask each other this, but I think it's not good. But y'all are welcome to hold small talk however y'all want to do it. But when people ask you, what do you do? And you say poet, they look at you crazy, even when they're poets. So I think little by little, I just started realizing I had to realize what I wasn't doing to figure out what I wanted to do. I had to realize that somehow or another I kept not studying for the LSAT. And I had to realize that I kept not signing up to take it. you know, and I had to, do you understand what I'm saying? And when the more I realized I was doing that, the more I realized what I was avoiding doing that was on this list of things, sort of maybe, you know, that my parents had in mind that I should be doing, the more I realized I was avoiding doing those things, it meant that I had to pay attention to what I was doing. And what I was doing was reading and writing poetry. And it's all I really wanted to do. And I don't think I was brave enough to call myself a poet until I had a book. And when my first book came out, I felt like that was the credential necessary for me to really call myself a poet. So though I think if there had been one big act of bravery, I would have never done it. But I think the fact that there are little bitty brave steps along the way, it's like an Adrian Rich poem, there are little bitty brave steps along the way that lead to you being able to claim who you are and be fully who you are. I say that because in order for me to do what I do, I have to understand that poet is my identity. And if I understand that poet is my identity, that means I service that identity the way I service all kinds of other identities that I have in the world. You know, I mentioned earlier that I'm my mother's son, and that means there are certain expectations of me, and I follow through with those expectations. You know, I'm Black, and so there are certain things that I know I can and cannot do in the world, and I follow through with those expectations. And there's certain knowledge that I understand I have that I might not have if I were not Black. And being a poet means I need to be where the poets are. It means I got a certain amount of reading I should be doing. I got a certain amount of writing that I should be doing. And when I'm reminded of that identity, it puts me back to work. I think another question.
I love listening to poets read their own poetry. Is there a market for audiobooks can you produce audiobooks of your own poetry? Does that exist? I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I have 2 audiobooks actually, one of the tradition and one of my second book, the New Testament. I wish I had an audiobook of Please. So now that you've asked that question, I need to get back to work on making that happen. It takes a little bit of pushing your publisher around. So there are actually 2 audiobooks of the tradition, one with someone else reading, actually another graduate of Dillard University where I went to undergraduate school, and one of me reading. So you could get it twice and hear it on different voices. I am actually a huge champion of reading work aloud while composing, of reading aloud to one another while working, if you're working with someone or working with a class on poems, on reading other people's poems aloud, and on listening to poetry on tape or audiobook. And part of the reason that I love doing that so much is it has a lot to do simply with my education and ultimately with work that I feel like shores up my soul. Because I've listened to so much poetry, I know a lot of poetry by heart. And because I know a lot of poetry by heart, when I'm in the midst of some of anything, I will find myself reciting poems to myself. And I also think it's been useful to my students, and maybe to some other folks too, when things come up, then I can say, oh, that's like a poem in which, and then I can recite the poem. So yeah, hopefully you will buy those and listen to others. There's actually the Library of Congress many years ago now put out, I think it's a 4 CD set. I don't know if it's still on CD or if you go to Apple Music or what, but it was called Our Souls Have Grown Deep. And it goes as far back as Arna Bonton and Langston Hughes reading their poems. And it goes all the way to Flavor Flav and Public Enemy. So, and everything in between, which I thought was really great for me in my education as a poet. Thank you. Thank y'all so much.